Hello. So, yes, I know what you're thinking. Wow, that's a cool picture of you. Well, it's not of me. I did take the picture, but I wish it was me. But that was sometime July, early August, maybe. We got a couple days of surf like that. So this is about internal regulation of different things like waste and water and things like that. And they've taken a lot of this specific stuff out of the AP syllabus, but have used some examples of it as general regulatory kind of examples, signal molecules, negative feedback especially. And then IB has some specific need to know physiology in it. So we're going to bounce back and forth a little bit between AP and IB stuff. So just a reminder for this one, whenever you see purple ink, that's higher level IB stuff. There's some red ink, I think, that's standard level IB stuff. All of that's IB stuff. And then you'll see some AP syllabus things in black ink, and those will be when we get to, I'll point those out. So we're dealing with the general idea of homeostasis, which is the mechanisms that are involved in maintaining a steady state compared to the outside of the organism to keep things like blood pressure and water levels and sugar levels and stuff. So that's our general idea here. You see that this is in, again, IB land. All animals excrete some kind of waste products that have nitrogen in them. They come from the break proteins and DNA, mostly proteins. And then also some, but not all animals, also balance water and solute concentrations. Basically, the ones that do that the most are definitely terrestrial ones. Since they live in a dry surrounding on land, terrestrial, right? They have to somehow keep a lot of water in them and not out too much. So these two things at turns go hand in hand very often. So that's why they're in the same sentence there in IB land. So here's some AP learning objectives. So this is also an IB kind of objective, but it would be found in the evolutionary part. What does it tell you if you have the same kind of homeostatic mechanisms involved? That suggests that they are related, right? They got them from the same place. That's what this says, right? But what have different kinds of mechanisms evolve, but they are responding, so to speak, to the same selection pressures, right? But different environments, you might get different solutions in different kinds of things. This is for like convergent evolution kind of idea. So anyway, we'll see examples of those as we go. Um, so here now we're going to focus first, I think, on osmoregulation as well as getting rid of those nitrogen wastes, because in people, which we're going to focus on, that's accomplished mostly by the same organ, your kidneys. Okay, so what we are going to see is this whole system is due to regulation of permeability across membrane. So this takes us into the cell structure, membrane structure arena also quite a bit. Applied examples of those kind of basics we talked about before, active and passive transport and membrane structure stuff. So what we have here in these systems that have evolved are a layer of cells. Epithelium means it's kind of on the outside, right? Doesn't actually have to be on the outside, but it can be an inner kind of surface, like of a capillary, that is the outer layer, epithelium, of that thing like a capillary. So, like it says here, fish's gills have some transport layer of cells, epithelia, layer of cells, that directly into the outside, like the water they're swimming in, but also have those inner capillaries, again in this case. And so it's the that layer of cells and their membranes, their plasma membranes, which are going to perform this regulatory stuff of getting the right things in and the right things out. Okay, so here we have a connection with cell structure. If we want this epithelium, this layer of cells, to not just leak everything in and out, right? We want some regulation so that stuff doesn't leak in and out between the cells and not pass through membranes. And that's why we often find those kind of cell-to-cell junctions called tight junctions, which connect two cells that are touching each other so tightly that stuff can't get through in between them. Has to go through a membrane and have that regulation happen. So here is an AP one. How does all this regulating water contribute to the health of organisms? And the complementary IB one, what are the consequences of dehydration and overhydration? Overhydration is never focused on as much because it's a much less common kind of term, but dehydration is quite common, especially in terrestrial things, so we'll focus more on that. But the overhydration consequence that we have talked about is if you're an animal cell with that flimsy plasma membrane and no cell wall, and you take in too much water, then you can swell and burst, which obviously would not be a good thing. Sorry, shut the phone off. Now I'll continue. So we have the idea that if, like you and I, right, like a mammal, and birds also, if things happen in you like sweating that helps regulate your temperature, you're a thermoregulator, right? We also call you endothermic. That's a little tricky too. It's kind of what warm-blooded means, but only kind of. Endothermic means you generate your heat from inside. That's the endo part. And you're usually pretty well insulated with either a layer of fat or feathers or fur, right? And that means this heat you generate pretty much stays inside and doesn't leak out too very easily. That keeps you from getting too cold if it's cold outside. But if you're the kind of thing like most reptiles, if you're a conformer, then if we look at this kind of graph, which would be one they might give you to, answer simple questions about really, right? If you're a conformer right here, that means as the temperature goes up, your temperature goes up. You conform to the outside temperature, and as it goes down, yours go down. But if you have evolved regulatory mechanisms, then no matter what the temperature within limits, outside temperature, you keep your internal temperature regulated so that it's about the same. Okay, so within certain ranges, we can regulate lots of things. Temperature's one of them, blood sugar's another one, and water and waste are going to be the two biggest topics in this set of notes here. So if we look at osmoregulation in an animal like a fish that lives in salt water, that's what the word marine means, right? They are drinking a lot of the water that they're living in, because since that water's salty and salt water would tend to draw water out of them, they have evolved ways to get enough water from what they drink in and get rid of salt, in this case by active transport out of their gills, which suggests you that the cells that line their gills in their membranes have pumps, active transport membrane protein pumps that excrete stuff like sodium ions and chlorine ions and salt ions, right? And so that means they drink in a lot of salty water, they pump out the salt, and they keep the water, by also producing very little urine, because that's one way that water always leaves your body. We're getting close to looking at the system where you get rid of nitrogen waste in that urine. They have to be dissolved, so you have to lose some water. Every time you urinate, you have to lose some water, but you want to not lose too much water, or else you're in trouble, right? But while we're at it, I didn't mention a couple slides back. What's the problem with being dehydrated? Well, it has mostly to do with chemistry. The chemistry of life must occur in solution. This chemistry won't occur dry, but the chemicals that are reacting need to be in the right concentrations. And if they're too concentrated because you have too little water, then it's going to be too many reactions happening at once, basically, and that's going to cause the cell to not be able to live very long without enough water. Too concentrated of cytoplasm is the danger of too little water. So now by contrast, if you're a freshwater fish, you can't help but drink in water. You're surrounded by it, and now this water is real watery. And so your problem is to keep salt in and to get rid of all this excess water. So you urinate lots of water out. Your urine is very dilute, it's not very concentrated, so you get rid of it that way. And then flip side of the coin of your saltwater cousins, your cells have membrane pumps that will pump the salt in. The little salt that's in water, there's always some salt in water, the little salt that's in water is going to be pumped into those cells and into your body. So it's really the flip side of the coin with saltwater and freshwater fish. Okay, back to one thing I think is in the syllabus somewhere, back in the cell part. Some one-celled things, they're all one-celled, have evolved that special vacuole that we call a contractile vacuole. What cell parts can cause this vacuole that in these things looks like a star? This would be a paramecium, little one-celled thing that lives in fresh water. So they have that problem of water coming in, like this fish, and they have to somehow get it out. They've evolved an active transport way to get it out. This is the only evolved active transport system that pumps water somewhere else. But instead of pumping it across the cell membrane, it diffuses across the membrane of this, I can't write on the little video for some reason, and then microfilaments in that cell contract and cause that to contract, pump that water out. These little channels you can see going out to it, which connect to the plasma membrane. Anyway, I'll let that play real fast. Boom, there you see that neat contraction. That's all caused by microfilaments. Now water's just diffusing in by osmosis because it's in a watery environment. It fills back up again. When it stretches a certain amount, that triggers the microfilaments to do that. Here it is in another thing. There it goes. Contract. Boom. Kind of neat. Okay. So, what adaptations do we see in terrestrial life? This might be part of a story they tell you and ask, questions like, why is water so important? I don't know. But having outer body coverings that help keep water in, whether they're made of wax or calcium carbonate shells or layers of dead skin, they all serve the same purpose: keep water in. What is this an example of? Convergent evolution, right? 3 different solutions, all the same. Create a watertight outer covering if you're going to live on land, but creating it out of different things, that's the convergent evolution idea.